Welcome to day 5. Can you believe it? It's already day 5. When we began this journey, most of you were scared of a blank paper and had never painted clouds, let alone in 4 different ways. These past 4 days would have taken you from being an overthinker to an explorer of watercolor to a person who loves and enjoys experimenting in watercolor, and that's exactly what we wanted to achieve with this 5-day challenge. And I hope you will continue with this watercolor journey. Now what we're going to do is bring together whatever we've learned in the past 4 days into a beautiful seascape. So let's get started. I'm using my Blue Pine Art sketchbook for this tutorial, and I will be using cobalt blue and indigo for this painting. We're doing more like a monochromatic painting, not getting into color mixing, but I want to help you understand and appreciate that all the lessons that we've been through so far are going to all culminate into this one today. So let's get started. I have taped down my horizon line here, which is at the 1/3 of my paper, and then I'm going to start now. So what my first step is going to be is I'm going to take you through the study of the reference that we are doing today. When you look at the reference, you can see that there is a background sky which has very light clouds, and here we'll use the lifting method with the paper towel. Second thing that you can see is there's layered mountains where we'll use tonal values to create the distance in the mountain ranges. And the third thing you can see is the reflection, and you can see how soft the reflection is in the calm water. So we're going to bring all the lessons that we've learned yet into this one painting, and that's why I picked this reference over all other references. So let's get started. So I'm going to wet my paper with my flat brush. While the paper soaks the water, I'm going to mix my cobalt blue here. Here's my palette, and here's my cobalt blue. So I'm going to mix my color here, and it is very diluted. So we're going to go with watery consistency where you can see through your palette. So this is the consistency that I'm going to go for my sky. Now I'm going to go right in and paint my sky. So my brush doesn't have loads of water, but it is damp and doesn't have dripping water. Like you can see, it's not dripping down, it's just loaded with water and the pigment. So there is no puddles forming on my paper. Now when I am at this stage where I have laid down the paint on the paper, I'm going to lift it with a paper towel. You don't need to follow the reference to the T, but I'm going to try and see if I can lift it at the same spots. So here is where I've lifted it. I think this is way too low, but I am okay with that. I'm going to try and leave it at that. Now I'm going to go in once more with a clean paper towel because I want it to be clearer, because I'm going to paint the shadow in there. So once I have that, so here is my shadow. I'm going to go in with my damp clean brush and then blend the edges. If I were to paint this again, I would probably go a little darker on the background of the sky so that the cloud and its shadow could pop up. Right now it's just blending in, it's just too light to even, create any kind of impact on the painting. That's our background done. I'm going to dry my paper and then come back for the mountains, and then in the meanwhile, I think while the paper dries, what we can do is also mix the pigments. So I'm going to, earlier it was 90% water and 10% pigment. Now I'm going to do like a 80-20 for the first range, for the first mountain range. And then I will keep adding more pigment to create more darker tone of paint here. Now my paper is completely dried up, so I'm going to go in with my first mountain range. So I'm going to go and just create. And then paint it across. I just did it with my brush directly because I don't want to go for perfection here. I don't want to copy the reference as it. I just want it to be close to the reference. However, if you want to kind of make it near perfect to the reference, you can sketch it before you go ahead and paint it. So that's my first layer of the mountains. Now I'm going to, while it dries, I'm going to mix more pigment, so this becomes like a 60-40. Come back after this dries up. My paper is dried up, but I also observed that the pigment now, though it is darker, it's also little dull. It has a bit of indigo in it, so I'm mixing a bit of indigo to get that depth or the dullness of the pigment. And I'm going to mix a little bit of water here to get that 60-40% back. And now I'm going to paint this mountain here. So it's coming from the top and meeting right here. So I'm going to go straight down and then flat and then probably up a bit and then down. And then you can fill in the paint inside. And since this is 100% cotton paper, you can see blending and painting is such a pleasure. I don't feel like it's an effort at all. Now when you're painting this mountain, since it's closer to you, if you just create some texture here by dabbing your brush, it feels there are trees on the mountain. Feel like it's a straight line. The further the mountain, you won't see the details, but the closer you get, if you just create these textures, it just makes it more natural. What we are going to do is add a little more of indigo to make it darker. We're not adding any more water, so it's more pigment and less water. Let me dry my paper now. This is our third layer, and now I am going to go straight up here and then end somewhere here. going to dry this again. Before I dry, I'm going to mix a little more indigo into this so it becomes, but I'll test it here. I want a little more water. Yeah, this is like a 50-50 ratio right now. Another thing I want you to observe is when you warm up your tape, you know, near your tape, this gets adhesive gets released or melts and the tape lifts off. So wait for it to cool down before you go back into paint. If this is otherwise your pigment will bleed into the tape and you will end up with those bleed lines. So yeah, just wait for the tape to kind of cool off and press it down before you go in for the next layer. So this is my final layer, and then I realized that I missed the mountain on the other side. There is one peeking through, so I'm going to go back in and paint that. So it's quickly able to create this consistency because I know the water to pigment ratio. Now we're going to dry this off again. Now let's paint the closest mountains or trees. So now here I will use just the indigo, which is going to be creamy consistency, and I'm going to start off here and then just draw straight lines that feel like trees. On the hindsight, I feel like how we painted our second mountain, we could have just painted the mountain and then created those peaks for the trees so that it could have looked more like there are trees in the foreground. But when I was actually painting this, it felt more like there is dense forest. But while I'm watching this and recording the voiceover, I feel like that could have been a good alternative to do. So if you're watching this tutorial ahead of starting your painting, do consider both these options and pick the one that you're most comfortable with. So this is the nearest mountain that you have, and here's your darkest layer. You can instantly see that we have created distance just with color value. Now I'm going to dry this layer. I'm going to dry this layer and then we are going to peel off the tape on the horizon line. So you can see there are no bleeds here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape the same tape on the top when I paint for my foreground. So for the foreground, again we are going to go by layers. First we will paint with cobalt blue, which is again going to be very transparent and very watery consistency. So here is my first layer. Use the tooth of your paper to your advantage. It's okay if there are some white spots. So I'm just covering it with the most lightest consistency cobalt blue, and generally it dries lighter than what it appears when it's wet. So don't worry if it feels like it's darker than the reflection that you see. It's okay. So now I have this laid down. I'm going to lift off some paint from here, not too much but just a little. You could also use your paper towel. I mean, it's easier that way actually, that you just lift off some bit. That's it. And then I'm going to go in with my diluted paint. Going to mix a little bit here in cobalt blue. Because the indigo is little overpowering color, I do not want to have a muddy mixture here. I'm just taking a little bit of it, and then we will paint our reflection. So for our reflection, we're going to go downwards. So just, you have to follow the mountain range. So this is going down, so I'm going, and then I'm following this mountain range, so I'm keeping on going down. So there's a peak here. Now I am not looking at my reference at all when I'm painting my reflection, because I have to follow what I did in my painting rather than what's on the reference. I'm going to continue with a little darker shade while it's still damp. Don't let it dry. Avoid creating blooms here when you go with darker pigment. Dry out my brush. Go in for indigo, which is creamy consistency. If you can see, I'm going in for indigo, which is creamy consistency, and then pull it down to create the depth of the layered mountains, because this peak is the light and the bottom one is the darker one. So I'm trying to create that effect, but my brush is damp to dry. It has no moisture except the bare minimum that is needed to put the paint on. So that's it. So that's what I did here. So you see the tonal value is needed even in the reflection. I am going to take out this tape now so that we can see what we are doing. Now finally you can appreciate why this dark reflection was needed. Now I'm going to paint reflection for this mountain range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with indigo, and we are going to go with creamy consistency. Coffee creamy, like little bit of moisture in the brush works. And we are going to start from this side and then keep pulling the paint down. You have to now focus on your painting the way you made your mountains and not look at the reference anymore, because you do not want your reflections to look like they belong to another painting. So this is another thing, when we take artistic freedom, we must really believe in those. We must commit to felt that was right at that point in time. You must actually commit to that. So now this is damp paper, so you can see these peaks. I'm going to pull them down with this damp brush. I'm not painting them, I'm just pulling them down to create those peaks. And now with the same damp brush, I'm going to take a little bit of paint and then run it past here on the damp paper. Do not let your paper dry and go very diluted so that you can create those ripples. You can go in with a darker paint, but make sure your brush doesn't have too much water in it. So here, now I'm going to dry my entire sheet of paper. Before I go do that, I'm going to create a straight so I'm going to dry my entire sheet of paper before we create more ripples. Now at this stage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my darkest blue and create straight lines up for depth. You see, this is dry brushing that we learned in our first day, right? Seems like very long ago. And now I'm going to use the same technique to create depth here. Now with the diluted paint, we're going to create some ripples here. And finally we'll paint some birds. I am using creamy consistency of indigo. If the past 5 days felt like fun and you want to go deeper into painting water and learn more about painting oceans and lakes, I have a full-blown course on watercolor oceans and lakes where I take you from being intimidated to being confident in handling water and in painting any kind of water, be it crashing waves or calm water, with step-by-step instructions. Now let's go back to our painting. Now when you observe the three tonal values, the light, mid and dark, you can see how much depth it has brought to our painting. I am taking this moment to reflect on how this painting turned out and what I learned from it, and I'll make notes for what I would do better next time when I paint this. First thing is, I think my mountain ranges are not as in the reference and their proportions or their layering is a bit off. I think my second mountain should go a little over the darkest mountain or the trees that is in the foreground. I would change that. Second thing I would change is when I'm painting my sky, I would go a little bit darker so that my clouds are more visible. Third thing I would do is I'd leave a little bit of white space in the reflection. So these are the things that make you a better artist. You have to take time to reflect on what you've painted and learn from every painting that you make. just like that, you did it. In 5 days, you went from a blank page to a beautiful seascape. Look at your artwork. Observe the sky, it glows. Observe the mountains, you've achieved the depth with tonal variation. Look at the reflections, they look blurred but still real. Not only painted a beautiful seascape, but you understood how watercolor works, and that's the difference. The 5-day challenge was just a glimpse of what's possible when you understand tonal values, layering, depth, and water control. If you've loved this process, if you've seen your confidence grow, and if you felt that you're no more intimidated by skies and watercolors, you're going to love what we're doing inside my Watercolor Oceans and Lakes course. And now I'm opening registrations to my course for a limited time. I'd love to invite you inside my course where we paint more lakes, more skies, more water with guided step-by-step instructions. This challenge was 5 days. My watercolor course is a whole journey. You will never feel overwhelmed. There will be no scope of overthinking. You will be guided every step of the way. But for now, let's take a moment and celebrate you. You practiced, you showed up, you grew. And that's what makes an artist. I'm so proud of you.